A 7-year-old daughter told her father something terrible about her stepmother, after which he decided to hide in the closet, and what he heard left him shocked. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the curtains of the small apartment, casting long shadows on the living room floor. John, a man in his early 40s, sat on the couch, staring into the void. The news was playing on the TV, but his mind was far away, recalling the events of the past few months. It had been a little over a year since he lost his wife, Karina, the mother of his daughter Sabrina, in a horrific car accident. The months that followed were a whirlpool of pain, confusion, and adjusting to life as a single father. Then, almost without noticing, Emma came into their lives. Emma was an attractive woman with a gentle smile and a magnetic personality. They met at work, where she became the new head of HR. At first, their relationship was strictly professional, but over time, casual chats at the office turned into dinner dates. Before John realized it, Emma had moved in with them. A noise from the hallway snapped John out of his thoughts. His 8-year-old daughter, Sabrina, appeared at the living room doorway. John immediately noticed something was off. Usually cheerful and chatty, Sabrina looked downcast, her shoulders slumped, and her eyes fixed on the floor. "Sabrina, are you okay, sweetheart?" John asked, rising from the couch. Sabrina lifted her eyes, and John saw they were red, as if she'd been crying recently. She bit her lower lip, and John instantly knew something was wrong. "Daddy, can I talk to you?" Sabrina whispered. "Of course, sweetheart," John said, patting the spot beside him on the couch. Sabrina slowly walked over, her steps hesitant, and sat beside her father, keeping a small distance between them. John frowned, concerned by her odd behavior. "What's wrong, sweetheart? You know you can tell me anything," John said. Sabrina nervously fidgeted with the hem of her dress, avoiding her father's gaze. "I don't know how to explain it. Sweetheart, whatever it is, you can trust me. I'm your dad, and I'll always be here for you. Tell me, why were you crying?" John spoke gently, though his worry was growing inside. Sabrina took a deep breath and finally looked him in the eye. Her eyes, so much like her mother's, were filled with fear and confusion. "It's about Aunt Emma, Daddy." John felt his heart skip a beat. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Sabrina bit her lip again, struggling to find the words. "She hurts me." The world around John seemed to freeze for a moment. "What do you mean? How does she hurt you?" Tears started rolling down Sabrina's cheeks. "When you're not around, she gets mad at me, says mean things, and sometimes pushes me or grabs my arm really hard." John stared, his mind refusing to process what he had just heard. "Sabrina, are you sure about what you're saying? Maybe it was just a game?" "No, Daddy," Sabrina interrupted, her voice trembling with tears. "It's not a game. It hurts, and I'm scared. Please believe me." John felt a surge of anxiety and confusion. He wanted to believe it was some kind of misunderstanding, that his daughter was exaggerating or misinterpreting things, but the look in her eyes and her trembling voice told him she was telling the truth. "Sabrina, sweetheart, of course I believe you." John opened his arms, and Sabrina threw herself into them, sobbing against his chest. He held her tightly, feeling tears well up in his own eyes. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart." They stayed like that for several minutes. John stroked Sabrina's hair until her sob eased. When she finally calmed down, John pulled back slightly to look her in the eye. "Sabrina, I need you to tell me everything." Sabrina wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "I think it started not long after Aunt Emma moved in. At first, she just yelled at me, but then she started pushing me and grabbing my arms whenever I did something she didn't like. And sometimes she pinches me when no one is watching," Sabrina added, lowering her eyes as if she felt ashamed. John felt anger boiling inside him. How could he not have noticed? How had he allowed this to happen to his little girl? "Sabrina, why didn't you tell me earlier?" Sabrina shrugged, looking embarrassed. "I was afraid. Emma said that if I told you, you'd be mad at me and send me to an orphanage. She said no one would believe me because she's an adult, and I'm just a silly little girl." John felt his heart shatter. "Sabrina, sweetheart, I would never send you anywhere. You're the most important thing in my life. and I'll always believe you and protect you. Sabrina slowly nodded, but John noticed the doubt still lingering in her eyes. You promise you won't be mad at me? I promise, sweetheart. This is not your fault. John kissed her on the forehead and hugged her again. After a moment, he stood up from the couch. Sabrina, I need to see if you have any bruises. Can you show me where Emma hurt you? Sabrina shyly nodded and rolled up the sleeves of her dress. John barely contained his shock and horror as he saw the fingerprints on his daughter's arms, some already yellowing, others more recent with a purple tint. My God, John whispered, feeling nauseous from what he saw. Sabrina, are there any other bruises? The girl nodded and lifted the hem of her dress, showing her legs. There were bruises there too, some clearly resembling handprints or fingerprints. John closed his eyes for a moment, holding back the wave of guilt and rage threatening to overwhelm him. When he opened his eyes again, he was met by Sabrina's frightened gaze. Are you angry, Dad? Not at you, sweetheart. I'm angry at Emma for hurting you and at myself for not noticing this earlier. But it's not your fault, Dad, Sabrina replied with a wisdom beyond her years. Emma's a really good actress. She always behaves well when you're around. John nodded, remembering all the times he'd seen Emma interacting with Sabrina. She always seemed gentle and patient. How could he have been so blind? Sabrina, I need you to tell me everything Emma does when I'm not around. Can you do that? Sabrina nodded, but John saw the shadow of fear cross her eyes. When you go to work, she changes. She becomes cold. She tells me I'm a burden, that I ruined her life when she moved in here. And what else does she say? John quietly asked, trying to keep his emotions in check. She says I'm stupid, that I'm good for nothing, and that you don't really love me. That's why you spend so much time at work. Sabrina's voice trembled again, and John felt a lump form in his throat. It's not true, sweetie. I love you more than anything in this world. You're the most important thing to me. Sabrina nodded, but John could see that Emma's words had left a deep mark on his daughter's soul. When was the last time she hurt you? The girl thought for a moment. It was yesterday when you came home late from work. I was watching TV and waiting for you, but she got mad and grabbed my hand, pushed me into the room, and told me to go to bed. John closed his eyes, recalling the previous night. He had come home late, tired after a long workday. Emma greeted him with a smile and said that Sabrina was already asleep. He went to her room, kissed her goodnight, but she looked as though she were sound asleep. Now he realized she had probably been pretending to avoid further trouble. Sabrina, is there anything else I need to know? Even the smallest detail could be important. The girl paused for a moment, then said, sometimes when you go to night shifts, she invites her friends over. They drink wine and talk really loudly. One time I woke up because I was thirsty. But when I went out, Emma got mad, grabbed me by my hair, and pushed me back into the room. She told me that if I came out again, she'd lock me in the closet all night. John felt his anger intensify. How could Emma threaten his daughter? How could she be so different from the woman he thought he knew? Sabrina, you were very brave to tell me all this. I promise you, I'll make it right. Emma will never hurt you again. Really? Sabrina's voice carried a mix of hope and fear. Really? From now on, everything will change. John hugged his daughter tightly, feeling her small body trembling. At that moment, the sound of a key in the front door made them both freeze. Sabrina clung to her father tighter. It's Emma, the girl whispered, her voice full of fear. John looked her in the eyes. Don't worry, sweetheart. I won't let her hurt you. Sabrina nodded. Her wide, fearful eyes were fixed on the living room door. John stood just as Emma entered the room. Hi, my favorite family. Emma's cheerful voice filled the space as she carried a grocery bag in one hand and her purse in the other. The smile faded slightly when she noticed the serious expression on John's face. What's wrong? John looked at Emma, the woman he thought he knew, the woman he had invited into his home, in his daughter's life. Now he saw her with new eyes, searching for signs of the cruelty Sabrina had spoken about. We need to talk, Emma, John said. His voice was calm but firm. Emma frowned and put the bags on the floor. Of course, what's going on? John turned to Sabrina, who was still watching the scene with fear in her eyes. "Sweetheart, why don't you go to your room for a minute? Daddy wants to talk to Emma alone." Sabrina looked at him anxiously, but then nodded and headed for the door. As she passed Emma, John noticed his daughter slightly stepping aside, trying to avoid any contact with the woman. Once Sabrina disappeared into the hallway, John turned to face Emma. Her smile had vanished, replaced by a look of caution. "John, you're scaring me. What's happening?" John took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Sabrina told me something that's causing me great concern." Emma blinked. Her expression quickly shifted to a mixture of surprise and something John couldn't quite identify: guilt, fear, or simple confusion. "What exactly? What are you talking about?" Emma's voice sounded calm, but John noticed a slight tremor. He crossed his arms over his chest, trying to keep his composure. "Sabrina said that you hurt her when I'm not around, that you yell at her, push her, and sometimes even threaten her." Emma laughed nervously, but her eyes darted around the room. "That's absurd. You know how much I love Sabrina. I would never hurt her." "I saw the bruises, Emma," John said in a quiet but dangerous tone. "She has marks on her arms and legs, clear fingerprints. How do you explain that?" The smile disappeared from Emma's face. "You know how it is with kids," she tried to smile, but her eyes revealed fear. "They're always running around, playing, and falling. She must have bumped herself at school or the playground." John shook his head, feeling his rage rising again. "Some of the bruises clearly show fingerprints. Sabrina told me exactly who did this." Emma took a step back as though John had struck her with his words. Her expression changed. "And you believe her?" she asked sharply. "You believe an 8-year-old girl more than me? John, think about what we've been through together. Do you really think I could do that?" John ran his hand through his hair, feeling confused. "I don't want to believe it, Emma, but the evidence is clear. Sabrina has never lied to me before." Emma scoffed loudly. "Children always lie, especially when they want attention. Don't you see what's going on? Sabrina's just jealous. She doesn't want to share you with me, so she's making up stories to break us apart." For a moment, John felt a shadow of doubt creep into his heart. Could this be true? Could Sabrina really have made all of this up? But then he remembered the fear in his daughter's eyes, the marks on her skin, and his doubts vanished. This isn't a lie from Sabrina. It's too specific, too consistent. And the bruises. "The bruises don't prove anything," Emma shouted, her voice full of anger. "That girl has always been clumsy. Maybe she hurt herself to get your attention." John was in disbelief, his voice trembling with restrained fury. "Do you really think my daughter would harm herself to get my attention? Do you hear yourself, Emma?" Emma seemed to realize she had crossed the line. She hesitated, trying to regain her composure. "Sorry," she muttered. "I didn't mean to say that. This is just such a crazy situation. I love Sabrina like my own daughter. I would never hurt her." "Then explain to me why my daughter is scared of you," John insisted. "Explain to me why she shakes when you enter the room. Why did she tell me you threatened to lock her in the closet if she came out again when your friends are over?" Emma paled even more. At these words, John raised his voice, unable to hold back his outrage any longer. "Listen, Emma, I don't know what's going on here, but I believe my daughter, and I love you very much. Right now, I think you need to leave for a while." Emma's head jerked up. Her eyes widened. "You're kicking me out?" "I'm asking you to give us some time," John corrected. "I need this time to talk to Sabrina and figure out what happened. Honestly, she won't feel comfortable while I'm figuring all this out." "But where am I supposed to go?" There was a note of despair in her voice now. John rubbed his face with his hands, feeling incredibly tired. "You can stay with a friend or at a hotel. I'm even willing to pay for a room if you need it. But I need you to leave." Emma looked around as if searching for an exit or a way to change the situation. But seeing the determination on John's face, she sighed deeply and slumped her shoulders. "Fine," she said quietly. "I'll pack some things and leave. But John, I swear, this is all some misunderstanding." "Not now, Emma," John interrupted her. "Just go, please." Emma nodded slowly and went to the bedroom. He watched her with a mix of emotions he couldn't fully understand. Part of him wanted to believe that it was all a misunderstanding, but another part, The one that saw the fear in Sabrina's eyes and the marks on her body, knew something was wrong. While Emma was packing, John went to Sabrina's room. He found her sitting on the bed, hugging her favorite stuffed bear tightly. "Dad," Sabrina whispered, her voice barely audible. "What will happen now?" John sat next to her on the bed and hugged her. "Emma is going to leave for a while. I need you to tell me everything that happened so we can fix this." Sabrina nodded slowly, clutching the bear even tighter. "Are you mad at me?" "No, sweetheart," John said, kissing her on the top of her head. "I'm very proud of you for being brave enough to tell me the truth. I know how hard that must have been." Sabrina relaxed a little from his words, leaning against her father. "I was so scared you wouldn't believe me." "I always believe you, sweetheart." John hugged her tightly again, promising himself that he would never let anyone hurt his daughter again. They heard the sound of the front door opening and closing. Emma had left. Sabrina tensed up again, and John whispered softly, "Don't be scared, sweetie. She won't hurt you anymore. I promise." Sabrina nodded, but John could see the fear still lingering in her eyes. He knew they had a long road ahead, needing to heal both physical and emotional wounds. But as he held his daughter, John promised himself that they would walk this road together, step by step. "How about we order some French fries for dinner?" he suggested, trying to lighten the mood. For the first time in a long while, she smiled. "Can we have it with sauce?" "Of course, sweetheart," John replied, feeling his heart lighten at her smile. John couldn't let Emma go so easily. He loved her. All night long, he replayed everything that had happened. By morning at breakfast, John decided it was time to take more serious steps. "Sabrina, sweetheart," he started, stirring his coffee, "I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened." Sabrina looked up from her bowl of cereal. Her big brown eyes were fixed on her father. "About Emma?" John nodded. "Yes, about Emma and what you told me. I want you to know, I believe you completely." "Go on, Dad." Sabrina's voice trembled, as if she already knew what he was going to say. John sighed. "But I need to see everything with my own eyes so I can protect you better and know exactly what to do." Sabrina dropped her spoon. Milk splashed onto the table. "You mean you'll let Emma come back?" "Just for a week," John hurried to reassure her, seeing the panic in her eyes. "I'll pretend I'm going to work, but I'll actually stay at home. I want to see how she behaves when she thinks I'm not around. I'd like to record it on camera." Sabrina looked horrified. "But Dad, she'll hurt me if she thinks you're gone." John stood up, walked around the table, and hugged Sabrina. "I won't let her hurt you. I promise I'll be here the whole time. If she tries anything, I'll come out and stop her immediately. Do you trust me?" Sabrina clung to him. "I trust you, Dad, but I'm scared." "I'm scared too," John admitted, "but we need to do this so Emma can never hurt you again. I love her, but I need solid evidence. I'm sorry, sweetie." They spent the next few days preparing carefully. John called Emma, pretending to be remorseful, and asked her to come back for one day to talk. Emma immediately agreed, her voice sounding excited, and as John now understood, with a false tenderness. The night before the big day, as John called it to himself, father and daughter sat on the couch discussing the plan. "One more time, remember, Sabrina," John said, his voice serious but gentle. "Tomorrow morning, we'll act like usual. I'll pretend I'm going to work, but I'll actually hide in your closet." Sabrina nodded, clutching her teddy bear tightly. "And I'll pretend everything is okay, even though I'll be scared." "That's right," John confirmed, stroking her hair. "I know it's hard, but you need to act as naturally as possible. If Emma suspects anything, the whole plan will fail." "I'll try, Dad," Sabrina promised. "But what if she tries to hurt me before you can get out of the closet?" John's heart tightened. "I'll be very careful, sweetie. At the first sign of danger, I'll come out right away. And remember, if you feel threatened, just yell the code word, and I'll be right there." "Strawberry ice cream," Sabrina whispered, remembering the code word they had chosen. "Exactly," John smiled. "Strawberry ice cream. And remember, no matter what happens, I'm so proud of you. You're the bravest girl in the world." Sabrina clung to him, finding comfort in his embrace. "I love you, Dad." "And I love you, my little brave girl," John replied, kissing her on the top of her head. The next morning, John woke up before dawn. His stomach was in knots with anxiety. He quietly got dressed and got ready, mentally preparing for the trial that lay ahead. When he woke Sabrina, she was already sitting on the bed with wide open eyes. "Ready for today, sweetie?" John asked softly. Sabrina nodded, but her eyes betrayed her fear. "Ready, Dad." They had breakfast in tense silence, too anxious to talk. As soon as John finished washing the dishes, the doorbell rang. "Must be Emma," John said, wiping his hands. He knelt in front of Sabrina, looked her in the eyes, and said, "Remember, act normal. I'll leave in a few minutes, but I'll be here the whole time." "Okay," Sabrina whispered. John opened the door. Emma stood on the threshold with a nervous smile on her face. "Hi, love," her voice was soft. "Thank you for giving me another chance." John nodded, forcing a smile. "Come on in. I'm about to head to work." Emma walked into the apartment. Her eyes scanned the room as if she was seeing it for the first time. When she saw Sabrina sitting at the table in the kitchen, her smile widened. "Sabrina, sweetie, I missed you so much." Sabrina mumbled a greeting, not lifting her eyes from her bowl. John noticed how his daughter tensed up, but Emma seemed not to notice. "Well, I guess I'll be going," John announced, grabbing his bag. "I'll be back in the evening, and we can talk then." Emma nodded eagerly. "Of course, have a good day at work." John kissed Sabrina on the forehead and whispered in her ear, "Remember, I'm always here." With one last look at his daughter, John stepped out the door, quietly closing it without fully shutting it, and waited for a few minutes in the hallway. After some time, he quietly opened the door and silently re-entered the apartment. He knew Emma liked to take a bath in the morning, which took at least an hour, so he went to Sabrina's room, climbed into the closet, and left the door slightly ajar so he could see and hear everything that was happening. Minutes turned into hours. John could hear muffled conversations between Emma and Sabrina in the distance. Sometimes he heard Sabrina laughing, but he was disturbed by the unnatural tension in her voice, which Emma seemed to ignore. John's legs were starting to ache, but he endured it, holding his breath and listening carefully for any sound. Finally, he thought that something was about to happen. He heard Emma approach Sabrina. "What do you want to do today, sweetie?" "Maybe play with your dolls," Sabrina answered quietly, but John caught her words. He didn't understand yet. "I don't know, I just want to sit for a bit." Emma seemed to be trying to win Sabrina over, speaking softly as if she were a completely different person, not the one Sabrina had described. A little later, John heard Emma suggest they watch cartoons, and then she went to the kitchen to make tea. John was starting to doubt his daughter's words. Why did she tell me Emma was hurting her? He wondered. At the moment Emma left the room to go to the bathroom, John decided it was enough. He crawled out of the closet, carefully left the apartment, and pretended to return home from work. "Hey," he said, entering, trying to sound natural. "How was your day?" Emma greeted him in the hallway with a smile. "Everything's great, darling. We had a good time, right, Sabrina?" Sabrina nodded but avoided her father's gaze. John felt a strange tension and wasn't sure how to interpret it. After they had dinner, John felt it was time to discuss what had happened. He led Sabrina to her room, helped her settle into bed, and then looked at her seriously. "Sabrina," he began, trying to stay calm but firm, "you told me Emma was hurting you, but today I heard how kind she was to you. Why did you lie to me?" Sabrina looked at him with wide eyes, clearly scared. "Dad, I wasn't lying," she whispered. "She's playing. Don't you see? I think she's just pretending everything is fine, but then she'll turn mean again." "Sabrina," John frowned, "but I heard how gentle she was with you all day. You can't just accuse people like that, especially Emma." "You don't understand, Dad," Sabrina insisted. "She just pretends when you leave, but when you're not around, she turns into someone else." Sabrina started crying, and John, frustrated, simply turned and left. He was confused. He didn't know who to trust. On one hand, Emma hadn't seemed suspicious to him, but on the other hand, this was his daughter, and he had to believe her. However, everything he had seen and heard didn't match her words. Later, John apologized to Emma for his doubts. "I'm sorry," he said, lowering his voice. "Maybe I'm being too suspicious. I just want to protect Sabrina." Emma stroked his hand and smiled, replying, "I understand. It's okay. You're her father." That night, John couldn't sleep, trying to figure out what the right thing to do was. The next morning, he decided to repeat his plan and hide again to give Sabrina a chance to prove she was telling the truth. He warned her that he would hide once more. This time, he planned to stay until the end to see everything with his own eyes and finally put his doubts to rest. He had already placed a stool in the closet the night before, so his legs wouldn't fall asleep. He knew how absurd the plan seemed, but he didn't know any other way to find the truth. The morning started as usual, with sweet conversations, but after about an hour, John heard footsteps approaching Sabrina's room and tensed up. The door opened and Sabrina entered, followed by Emma. Sabrina sat on the bed while Emma stayed by the door, her posture threatening. "Well, Sabrina," Emma said in a cold voice, the first time John had heard her speak like that, "I think we need to talk today." John felt his blood run cold. Emma's voice had become harsh, as if her mask had fallen off and her dark side was revealed. He grabbed his phone to record the conversation. Sabrina, trembling, backed away, pressing herself against the wall. "What do you mean, Aunt Emma?" Emma stepped closer to Sabrina, her figure looming over her like a shadow. "About the lies you told your dad." John felt his heart skip a beat. He was ready to burst out of the closet, but he needed to wait for the confession. Sabrina, shaking, murmured, "I didn't lie," her voice so quiet as if she was afraid to speak louder. "You hurt me," Emma sneered. "Hurt you?" "Honey, I haven't even started hurting you yet." John could barely hold himself back from running out immediately, but he knew he needed to gather all the evidence to make everything clear. Emma got even closer to Sabrina, her voice turning into a hiss. "Listen here, little liar. You're going to go to your dad and tell him it was all a misunderstanding, that you just exaggerated. Do you understand?" Sabrina shook her head. Tears started streaming down her cheeks. "No, I can't. I won't lie to him." Emma reached out and grabbed Sabrina's arm. Sabrina screamed in pain. "Strawberry ice cream!" she shouted, and John immediately rushed out of the closet. As soon as John burst out, Emma froze and instantly released Sabrina's arm, stepping back. Her face turned pale from shock. "What are you doing here?" she stammered, her voice full of fear. John stepped between Emma and Sabrina, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "I heard and saw everything, Emma. Every word, every threat. I recorded it all. The way you held her, the way you hurt her." Emma stood still, her confidence disappearing in an instant, replaced by a look of fear. "John, this isn't what you think. I was just trying to—" "Trying to what?" John interrupted. "Threatening an 8-year-old to make her lie and fear you?" Emma tried to justify herself, her gaze darting around the room. "I was just trying to discipline her. Sabrina has been acting out lately." "Enough!" John yelled, making Sabrina flinch. "Enough of the lies. I saw the bruises on her body. I heard her fear. You've gone too far, and I have proof." Emma's face changed. Her eyes filled with tears, and she lowered her hands as if accepting her defeat. "John, please. I love you. We can fix this. I made mistakes, but I can change. I swear." "There's nothing to fix, Emma," John said coldly. "I want you to leave. Now, if you ever come near my daughter again, I'll call the police." Emma glanced at Sabrina, who was holding John's hand tightly. Her face showed complete defeat. For a moment, John thought she might say something more, but she just turned and walked out of the room. A moment later, John heard the door slam shut. Sabrina, standing next to him, threw herself into his arms. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" "I'm sorry I ran out so late." Sabrina shook her head, holding on to her father tightly, trembling all over. "I was so scared, Dad, but I knew you were here." John kissed her on the top of her head, holding back his own tears. "I'm sorry, sweetie. I'm sorry I didn't understand everything earlier. Sorry I didn't protect you right away." Sabrina pulled away slightly, looked at him with her big sparkling eyes and said, "You were so brave. You came and protected me." John smiled through his tears, stroking her hair. "You're brave too, Sabrina. You were strong and told me the truth. I'm so proud of you." They sat on the bed holding each other as fear gradually faded away, giving way to relief. He finally felt ready to take another step toward a new beginning. "How about some pizza?" he suggested, trying to lighten the mood. "We can order whatever you want." Sabrina nodded. Her eyes sparkled again, now with a childlike enthusiasm. 4-cheese pizza, and Hawaiian. Anything you want, sweetheart. John hugged her again, feeling lighter in his heart. The weekend came. Father and Sabrina went to the store to buy something for Sabrina. While they were waiting in line at the checkout, Sabrina suddenly tensed and grabbed John's hand. Dad, she whispered, it's Emma. John followed her gaze and indeed saw Emma. She had noticed them too and started moving toward them, trying to look calm. John felt his anger rising again. Hi, John, Emma said, stopping in front of them. We need to talk. I don't think so, John said, trying to keep his voice under control. Please, Emma continued, ignoring Sabrina. I need to explain what happened. It's all some kind of misunderstanding. Sabrina hid behind John, and he felt her grip tightening on his hand. This strengthened his resolve. Not now, Emma, he replied, keeping his gaze fixed on her. You don't belong here with us. Emma tried to say something, but John interrupted her. Just try to get any closer to us again. Seeing that people around them were starting to notice, she briefly looked at John, then at Sabrina. John, I just want to fix everything. Please, give me a chance. Enough, John said firmly, protecting Sabrina from her gaze. Leave. Emma stopped, realizing she had no chance of reconciliation. She quickly turned around and left the store, not saying another word. John felt the tension ease, and he and Sabrina hurried to finish their shopping. When they got home after the encounter with Emma in the store, Sabrina was still holding her father's hand tightly. She seemed visibly disturbed, and as soon as the door closed behind them, she looked at John with a serious expression. Dad, I don't want to see any women in our house anymore, Sabrina said, her voice full of determination. They scare me. John stood in front of her, trying to meet her gaze. He understood that this fear was the result of painful experiences that had left a deep mark. Sabrina, he said gently, I understand why you feel this way, and I promise you no one will ever hurt you again. Sabrina nodded, but her eyes remained anxious. I want it to just be the two of us, she added, her voice a mixture of fear and calm. John took her hand and looked into her eyes. Okay, sweetie, he replied. If that's how you feel, then it will just be the two of us. I don't want you to be scared, but know that if anyone new ever comes into our lives, I will watch them very carefully. I won't let anyone, and I mean anyone, hurt you. You will always come first to me. Sabrina smiled slightly and hugged her father, her arms wrapped around his neck, and he felt her finally relax. Thank you, Dad. I know you'll protect me. Always, John whispered softly, hugging her back. You're my most important person. Later that evening, sitting together on the couch, they watched cartoons and enjoyed the comfort of home. John held Sabrina's hand, happy to hear her laughter and to know she felt safe again. They shared a blanket and a box of cookies that Sabrina had decorated with bright drawings. The world outside seemed distant and unimportant, and although new challenges awaited them, John knew they would face them together. Now they both knew that nothing was more important than trust and mutual support. Sabrina no longer seemed as frightened as she had before. Together, as father and daughter, they were ready to face whatever life had in store for them. Thank you for listening to the story until the end. Let us know if you think the father did the right thing. Subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. It motivates us to continue working on new stories every day. Don't miss the next amazing story. We are very grateful that you're with us. See you soon.